So we've got a lot to unpack today
Yeah.
about Nigeria's proposed tax reforms,
Mm-hmm.
for 2024.
Right.
We've got a whole stack of articles here.
Yeah, it's like
We've got government proposals, we've got economic analyses, we've even got some
wow,
pretty strong reactions, actually, from religious leaders and youth groups.
interesting.
So,
Yeah, so this is a big deal.
yeah, seems like a pretty big deal.
Definitely.
So I guess the big question is,
Yeah.
are these reforms going to fix things or are they going to make things worse?
Well, I think the interesting thing here is that it's not just like they're tinkering with a few things.
Right.
They're really trying to overhaul the entire system.
Wow.
And you have to think of the context here.
Yeah.
We're talking about a country with a 33.88% inflation rate,
Right.
133 million people
Yes.
living in multidimensional poverty.
Yeah, those numbers are really...
It's a serious situation.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
So, how do these tax reforms even begin to address problems that big?
They've actually broken it down into 4 separate bills.
Okay.
Each one has a specific focus. It's kind of like they're rebuilding the house,
Yeah.
from the foundation up.
Okay, I like that analogy.
Yeah.
So break it down for us then. What are these 4 bills and what's the game plan for each?
Okay. So the first one is called the Nigeria Tax Bill 2024.
Okay.
And that one is like the blueprint. It sets the overall framework for everything.
Right.
Then you've got the Tax Administration Bill.
Okay.
This is the one that's all about streamlining processes, making things simpler,
Gotcha.
hopefully more efficient,
Makes sense.
less red tape, less confusion for everybody.
Yeah, less headache.
Exactly.
All right, and what about the other 2?
Okay, so the third one is the Nigeria Revenue Service Establishment Bill.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this one is a big one because it's actually replacing the entire old system for collecting revenue.
Wow, a complete overhaul.
Yeah, bringing it into the modern era.
So are they basically starting from scratch?
Pretty much, yeah. And then the final and the fourth one is the Joint Revenue Board Establishment Bill.
Okay.
And that one is all about accountability.
Okay.
So it's proposing to create a tax tribunal and a tax ombudsman,
Interesting.
which would give citizens more avenues to resolve disputes and basically, challenge the tax authorities.
So it's like a system of checks and balances.
Exactly.
Okay, so it sounds like they're really trying to cover all the bases here,
Yep.
from the overall structure right down to like how disputes are handled.
It's a comprehensive approach.
Yeah, but let's get down to brass tacks here.
Okay.
What are some of the key changes that people are really talking about?
I think the biggest one that everyone's focusing on is the possibility of reduced taxes.
Okay.
The government is claiming that 90%
Wow.
of Nigerian workers could actually see their tax burden go down.
90%, that's a huge number.
It is, yeah, and that includes everyone earning an $800,000 or less annually,
Okay.
plus all minimum wage earners.
That's a bold claim.
It is.
How would they even pull that off?
Well, one of the things they're proposing is to completely exempt 30% of Nigerians who are earning between N50,000 and N70,000 from paying any taxes at all.
Wow, so those people are basically off the hook.
Essentially, yeah.
Okay, so that's a win for them. But what about everyone else? I mean, are we really going to see tax relief across the board?
It's hard to say for sure.
Right.
But there are a few other interesting things in the bills.
Like what?
Well, there are changes to the VAT sharing formula, for one.
Okay.
And then there's this new development levy that's going to be replacing a whole bunch of existing taxes.
Hold on, let's back up for a sec.
Sure.
What's this VAT sharing formula and why is everyone making such a fuss about it?
So right now, the way it works is that a lot of the VAT revenue goes to the state where a company's headquarters is located,
Yeah.
even if their products are being sold all over the country.
So like a company based in Lagos
Exactly.
could be making money from sales in Kano.
Yeah, and all that VAT revenue would go to Lagos.
Even though the actual consumption is happening in Kano. So it's kind of a loophole.
Yeah, you could say that.
That benefits some states at the expense of others.
Yeah, it's created some tension for sure.
I bet.
So what they're trying to do with these new bills is to make sure that states get credit for the consumption that's happening within their own territory.
Okay, so it sounds fair in principle.
It does.
And I'm guessing there's a catch.
Well, there's always a catch, right?
Right.
The problem is that some of the northern governors are worried that this is actually going to hurt their states financially.
So they're afraid of losing out, even though it's supposed to be more equitable.
Exactly. And it raises some tough questions.
Yeah.
Like, is this really going to be fairer for everyone?
Right.
Or is it just going to shift the imbalance in a different direction?
Right, because you're basically robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Yeah, it's complicated.
Yeah, no kid.
There are no easy answers.
Okay, so we've got the VAT thing. We've got this new development levy.
Right,
What's the deal with that one?
Well, on the surface, it sounds like they're trying to simplify things.
Hmm.
They're talking about taking all these different taxes
Right.
and replacing them with a single 4% development levy.
Okay.
So, in theory, that should make things easier for businesses,
Especially small businesses.
especially small businesses. Yeah,
Really?
less paperwork, less hassle.
Less headache.
Exactly.
But I mean, is there a downside to this?
Well, the devil's always in the details.
Of course.
So we need to look at exactly which taxes they're getting rid of
Right.
and how this new levy compares.
Yeah, because it might not actually be lower overall.
Exactly. And then there's the question of what they're actually going to do with the money.
Because, I mean, development levy sounds great.
Yeah, it has a nice ring to it.
But how do we know it's actually going to be used for development?
That's the key question, right?
Right.
Transparency and accountability are really important here.
Totally.
Nigerians need to see that this money is being used effectively.
Yeah, and not just disappearing.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got potential tax breaks, we've got a VAT shakeup, we've got this new development levy. It's a lot to digest.
It is.
But I guess what I keep coming back to
Yeah.
is, what about the people who are already struggling?
Yeah.
Are these reforms really going to help them, or could they actually make things worse?
That's the million-dollar question.
It is.
And I think to answer it, we really need to dive into the nitty-gritty.
Okay.
Look at the specific provisions, especially the ones that are aimed at lower income earners and small businesses.
Right.
And we also need to think about the potential impact of things like, the VAT increase on certain goods and services.
Right, because it's all well and good to say we're going to lower taxes.
Yeah.
But if the cost of living goes up at the same time,
Exactly.
then what's the point?
You're right. We have to look at the whole picture.
The whole picture.
And that's what we'll be doing as we continue this deep dive.
All right, well, let's dive in then.
Let's do it.
So we've talked about, the big picture stuff, the VAT, the development levy, the whole idea of simplifying taxes.
You're right.
But what about the little things?
Yeah.
The things that could actually make a difference in people's lives, day to day.
Oh, that's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
So, for example, they've increased the tax exemption threshold for small businesses.
Okay.
Quite a bit, actually.
So how much are we talking here?
It's gone up from 25 million naira to 50 million in annual turnover,
Okay.
or 250 million in assets.
Okay, but what does that actually mean for, a small business owner?
Well, it means they could potentially be keeping a lot more of their money,
Right.
which means they've got more money to reinvest in their business, maybe hire more people.
Yeah, or just, put food on the table.
Exactly. It's all about supporting those small and medium enterprises.
Right, because they're the backbone of the economy.
They are. Absolutely.
Okay, but let's talk about the other side of the coin here.
Okay.
Because there are a lot of people who are saying that these reforms are actually going to hurt the poor.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of pushback.
I mean, we've got religious leaders, we've got youth groups, we've even got some economists
Right.
who are raising some serious red flags.
Yeah, and those concerns are valid. We need to listen to them.
Absolutely.
So what are they saying?
Well, Professor Mansour Ibrahim, for example,
Okay.
he's been very vocal about this.
Right.
He's worried that pushing these reforms through so quickly
Right. Yeah.
could have some really bad unintended consequences.
Like what?
While he's particularly concerned about the impact on people who are already struggling to make ends meet.
Right. Those who are barely getting by as it is.
Exactly. And it's not just him.
Right.
The Northern Youth Assembly has also come out pretty strongly against this.
Yeah. They haven't been shy about it.
No, they haven't. They're accusing the Deputy Senate President Bola Tinubu
Wow.
of basically betraying the North.
By supporting these bills.
Yeah, they're saying he's completely out of touch.
Out of touch with reality.
Yeah, with the economic realities of the region.
That's a pretty serious accusation.
It is, and
Right.
it speaks to a larger issue here.
Which is due.
Trust.
That's-
There's a deep mistrust between a lot of Nigerians and their government. Yeah, you can't really blame them.
No, you can't. I mean, they need to see that these reforms are actually going to benefit them.
Right, not just the politicians.
Exactly.
So how does the government even begin to address that?
Well, they've been trying to focus on the positive,
Okay.
emphasizing the potential benefits,
Okay.
especially the reduced tax burden for most Nigerians.
Right.
Taiwo Oidel,
Who's that?
he's the head of the Presidential Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms Committee,
Okay.
and he's been very clear about this.
About what?
He keeps saying that 90% of workers will actually end up paying less in taxes.
Okay, so that's a good talking point,
Yeah, it's a good starting point.
if it's true.
Right. But even if it is true,
Yeah.
there's still this underlying fear that these reforms are going to hit the poorest the hardest.
Yeah. How do you balance the need for more revenue with the need to protect the people who are most vulnerable?
That is the question, isn't it?
It is the millionaire question.
It really is. And I think the answer lies in the details.
Okay, so let's get into the details.
All right. So one thing they're proposing is to completely exempt minimum wage earners
Okay.
from paying income tax.
At all.
At all.
Okay, so that's a win for them.
Right? A direct win.
But what about everybody else?
Yeah. What about the people who are just above that minimum wage threshold?
Right, people who are still struggling.
Exactly. And that's where things get a little tricky.
Okay, why?
Well, remember that VAT increase on non-essential goods we were talking about?
Yeah,
That could have a really big impact on lower income households
because...
because they're spending a larger chunk of their income
Right.
on those goods.
So it's kind of a wash.
Yeah, you could say that lower income taxes on one hand,
Right.
potentially higher prices for basic necessities on the other.
So are people really better off?
That's the question.
It is.
And that's why we need to look at the whole picture,
Right.
not just the individual pieces in isolation.
Yeah, we can't just focus on the tax cuts.
Exactly. We need to think about the bigger picture.
The bigger picture. And that includes looking at what the government's actually planning to do with all this extra money they're hoping to collect.
Right, because if this is really about improving people's lives,
Yeah.
then those development projects, those investments in infrastructure and social services,
Right.
they need to be front and center.
They do. And what about the informal sector?
Oh, yes.
I mean, how do these reforms address that whole issue of bringing those businesses into the tax net?
Well, the tax administration bill does include a simplified income tax return,
Okay.
specifically for low-income earners and those in the informal sector.
Okay.
But the details are still a little vague at this point.
So we don't really know how it's going to work
Not yet. It's too early to say whether it'll be effective or not.
or whether people will see it as a good thing or a bad thing.
Exactly. There are still a lot of unknowns.
It sounds like there are a lot of unknowns.
There are.
I mean, there's a lot riding on these reforms.
Absolutely.
If they succeed, it could be a real game changer for Nigeria.
It could be a chance to build a more stable and prosperous future.
But if they fail,
Well,
it could make things even worse
it could deepen the inequalities that already exist.
and make all the problems they're trying to solve even worse.
Exactly. The stakes are incredibly high.
So high.
And that's why it's so important to talk about this,
Right.
to have open and honest discussions about the potential consequences.
Of good and bad.
Exactly. We need to move beyond the politics
Right.
and really focus on what these reforms are going to mean for everyday Nigerian.
For real people.
Yeah, for real people.
You know, it's like we're at this crossroads
Yeah.
with these tax reforms.
Yeah.
On one hand, you've got the potential for,
Right.
a more modern, a more efficient system, something
Right.
that could really help Nigeria's economy take off.
Absolutely.
But then on the other hand,
Yeah.
there's this fear
Right.
that it could actually make things worse.
Yeah, especially for people who are already struggling.
Exactly. And it's interesting how this whole debate is really spilling out into the streets.
Yeah, it's not just happening in the government anymore.
Right. You've got religious leaders weighing in. You've got youth groups protesting.
Yeah, it's on social media.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
It's become a real national conversation.
Which is a good thing, right?
Yeah, it shows that people are engaged.
Right. They're paying attention.
They want to have a say in their future.
Exactly. But for any of this to work,
Yeah.
for these reforms to have a chance, there needs to be trust.
Trust is huge.
Nigerians need to trust that the government is actually going to use this money wisely,
It's essential.
that they're going to deliver on those promises.
Yeah, because trust is not something you can build overnight,
Especially not in Nigeria.
especially not in Nigeria. It takes time.
It takes action.
It takes transparency.
Showing people where their money is going.
Exactly, holding the government accountable for every naira.
And that means tackling corruption.
Ah, yes, the elephant in the room.
Right. I mean, it's been a problem for so long.
It has.
And it's really eroded people's trust.
It's undermined development.
So if the government is serious about these reforms,
Yeah.
they need to show that they're serious about fighting corruption.
It's not just about ethics.
Right.
It's about economics.
Because corruption holds the whole country back.
It really does. It discourages investment. It distorts markets.
And ultimately, it hurts the poor the most.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, passing these tax bills is important.
Right.
But it's just the first step.
So what's the next step?
Implementation.
Okay.
How are they actually going to handle all this new revenue?
Right. Are they going to use it wisely?
Exactly.
Right.
Can they convince the Nigerian people that this is a new era?
An era of transparency.
Yes, transparency and accountability.
So for our listeners out there
Yeah.
who've been following along with this whole saga, what should they be watching for?
Well, first of all, stay informed.
Okay.
Don't just read the headlines.
Right. Go deeper.
Go deeper, read the bills, understand the details.
Talk to people.
Talk to people, get different perspectives.
Don't be afraid to ask questions.
Ask tough questions.
Hold your leaders accountable.
Absolutely, because this is your country.
Your future.
You have a right to be part of this.
What's so fascinating about all of this is that
Yeah.
it's not just about taxes.
It's about so much more.
It's about the relationship between the government and the people.
Exactly. It's about who has the power
Who benefit.
and how that power is used.
It's about whether Nigeria can finally create a system
Yeah.
that works for everyone.
A system that's fair and transparent.
And that's a story worth following.
It really is.
It really is. Well, thank you for joining me on this deep dive
It's been a pleasure.
into Nigeria's tax reform bills.
Yeah. It's a fascinating topic.
It is, and I have a feeling this is just the beginning.
Oh, yeah. This story's not over yet.
To all our listeners out there,
Yeah.
keep asking questions,
Stay engaged.
stay informed.
And let's see where this road leads.
Absolutely.